right, welcome to another Byte Federal podcast. Our guest today is Guy Swann. And Guy, I just want to tell you, I'm so happy that you're here because I've watched your content for years and I've learned so much from your channel. So thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Oh yeah, man. Good to be here, man.
Awesome. So look, I know you can go down a number of rabbit holes in the Bitcoin topic, but I really wanted to dig in with you today on AI and how AI is going to interact/disrupt traditional finance and maybe be more aligned with where Bitcoin network is going and what that transition might look like. Because I think this is an incredibly important topic for people to understand. And a lot of people haven't gone there yet. But you seem to have dug into it deeply. So I really appreciate all the work you're doing on that front.
Yeah. So I started the AI Unchained podcast. I guess like a year and a half ago now. God, almost 2 years.
Wow.
How long have I been doing that one? I don't know. It feels like it's fresh. It feels like it's new,
AI. It's always fresh, right?
Yeah. And I mostly just like I started that and the pair report because I have started spending so much time on basically new tech that I've always just kind of been a nerd, and like something new or like really cool comes out and I find some way to use it, and I'm just down the rabbit hole. I mean, Bitcoin's the perfect example. It's just the one that I never really escaped from. In the context of finance, specifically, since you brought it up, is I don't think AI will change. I don't think AI will have much effect on finance specifically. Like, I think Bitcoin will change finance because it will mostly just because our financial system is just so horrifically bloated. Like when you print money or you issue money as debt into the economy, it necessarily starts in financial instruments. Like it pushes through the economy. It trickles, quote unquote, trickles down from financial institutions to the actual economy. And finance is the entire purpose of finance is to just organize the things that are there. It's like your accounting department. If your business didn't grow and your accounting department got twice as large, you have a problem because you're wasting money on accounting. Like your accounting department, it should be easier to do the accounting as time goes on if technology is getting better, right?
Right.
So same with finance. Finance should not be a bigger part of the economy. And yet since 1980, it's doubled in size as a portion of GDP. So the amount of capital that we are wasting just to organize the stuff that we own has doubled. Like we're just wasting excruciating. And what has it done? It's created this massive environment of just corruption and gambling because there is money for the sake of money in that environment that is totally meaningless. It's just been completely divorced from all physical reality on the ground. And you can see it because they don't even think about what's actually happening anymore. It's all charts and numbers. And that's not, if you're not looking at a P&E ratio, if you're not looking at like, is this business actually producing? Like the quintessential, like what I think of as like the peak fiat mindset was that guy who was talking about how like, oh, this company is definitely going to go up and everything's looking strong and all this stuff. And the guy says, what does the company do? And he goes, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. He says, what does the company do? What's you're talking, this company's got a great future and all this stuff. It's like, what does the company do? And he's like, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. You're breaking up. I'm sorry. And then he cuts it off. Like he shuts down the interview because he has no idea. He has no clue. He is playing a game of charting, Right. And like, that's like such a prime, like analogy or metaphor to where we are.
Kind of like the GE story where General Electric built these utilities that we could utilize for years and then just totally went and became this financial organization.
Yeah. I mean, everything has become a financial organization. What major company do you know today that doesn't issue a company credit card? Right. And so like, if you get a Lowe's credit card, You get
Right.
10% off your stuff. You get an Apple credit card, you get 5% back. Like everybody is a financial company now because it is the lowest cost barrier. If you can issue credit, you can just get interest payments like crazy. And when you
Right.
are getting those payments, when you're issuing that debt at like 18-20% interest, it's the easiest way to get new money because you're literally pulling it from institutions that create it out of thin air. So like
Right.
Bitcoin is going to reprice that because you can't do that in Bitcoin. Your credit, and if you denominate credit in Bitcoin, you're going to get smashed. You're going to get absolutely obliterated. So you have to go back. Like the real economy, like take money out of the equation. The real world is asset based. It is savings based. If you
Yeah.
didn't cut down a tree, can't build a house. Like there's no like I'm going to cut down trees next year and I'm going to go ahead and build my house today. Somebody had to cut down the trees. Reality has to happen in order. It is only finance that gives you the illusion that you can go into debt to do something before you actually do its prerequisites. You know,
Yeah.
you can't poop before you eat. um, and uh, we have completely lost touch with reality because of how corrupt and how bloated and manipulated our financial system is. Because it's like one of those things. An analogy I like to use is that the political economy or the political sphere and counterfeit class, when they look at it from a top down perspective, they say, oh, a great economy has these attributes and the numbers look like this. The GDP numbers go up or this happens. And they have all of these just kind of empty quality, qualitatively empty metrics. Like they don't really mean anything. They're just kind of like, this is the results, kind of like the thermometer's higher when it's warmer outside. And so you're like, okay, so what we want is the thermometer to go higher. And then it gets cold outside. And they're like, well, if we squeeze more mercury into the thermometer, it goes up. Hey, we did it. And so their whole game is to just manipulate the numbers to make it appear as if there's a strong economy. It's like it's the same thing they literally do with subsidies and with like trying to fix people who are disadvantaged or whatever. It's like, well, a healthy economy and like an intelligent and educated and like a well thought out population who knows how to do decision making and long term thinking. What do they have? They have street lights that work. They have a white picket fence and they have a house. Well, if we change the light bulbs out, build a bunch of new street lights, give everybody a picket fence and a house, well, then all of those other things will have been the same. Like it means that we'll have good decision making, and it's the exact opposite. Those are results, not causes. And so the entire thing gets around manipulating the metric to appear as if there's health, to
Right.
appear as if there's wealth, and it's just completely financialized.
Man, that this is just triggering something in me that I read recently in some of Luke Groman's research that,
Mm-hmm.
China, long-term thinker, building real goods and services and saving.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're focused on delivering actual product
Yeah,
before,
they
as
have to
as
manufacture.
the mercantile,
Yeah.
right? Or the mercantist for this entire global economy,
Mm-hmm.
where we're just creating the money out of thin air to pay for these real goods and services and saying we're getting economic benefit because we're buying cheap goods and services.
Our biggest export is numbers written on paper and numbers in spreadsheets.
Mm-hmm.
It's the
Mm-hmm.
money is
Yeah,
our biggest
100%.
export, and it's a net export for like 50 years.
Yeah,
And we're
that's
exporting our
crazy.
manufacturing capability with it. And a bunch of people like think that because we're a quote unquote modern economy, you'll hear this a lot from the left, but you hear it from the right too. Like everybody in the political sphere is just generally dumb, um, um, or ignorant is the better word. But they'll constantly say it's like, oh no, when the economy advances, you become a service economy, and what you do is you import all of these things. It's like, no, that's what a weak dependent economy does, is you become just frivolous. You become icing. You become just decorations. You become sprinkles. It's not real
Mm-hmm.
food. It's just stuff to make it look good.
Right.
And the reason if we have a only service based economy, it means we can't feed ourselves. It means we can't keep our lights on. It means that we can't wash our clothes without buying all of those things from somebody else. And if some of those other people decide they're not going to sell us washing machines or oil, well, then we can't do anything. We're completely incapable.
Right. Or
We've
if we get to a position where we can't issue any more debt and drive this whole financial game.
exactly, the entire thing depends on our export of paper. And if that paper becomes worthless or people stop wanting our paper, we're dead in the water. We're screwed, and the price of everything skyrockets because we will have a shortage on top. We will have a shortage of stuff, a shortage of manufacturing because we exported it all. And at the exact same time, we will have a gross surplus of the paper because it will all come rushing back home from overseas because we've been printing it and sending it out to the rest of the world at a ridiculous rate. So it's like we can grow bigger than anyone because of the global reserve currency status. And we can have more wealth on the front end of this 50 to 80-year trend, whatever it is. But on the back end, we will be hurt worse than anybody else. And the only way out of it is to stop using the money and to stop using it as fast as possible and start pricing stuff in reality. And that's the thing, is that like you can't print stuff. You can't print trees. You have to grow them.
Right.
And it's slow, it's hard, takes a lot of work.
Do you think the political class is working or is waking up to this fact and this reality? I mean, is that why we're hearing
maybe
a Bitcoin reserve? Why we're hearing Bitcoin at the Treasury?
I don't think it requires people to understand. That's one of the important things, is that they will do it out of self-interest because Bitcoin will always go up priced in fiat. Mm-hmm. Because there will always be more fiat and there will always be 21 million Bitcoin.
Right.
So a lot of people, it's great to be educated. It's great to understand how these systems work, but it's also important to understand that the systems work in spite of people not understanding it. My car doesn't work because I understand how an engine works. Right. Most people drive cars without having the first clue, not being able to explain, what a two-stroke engine is, or, the pistons, or how the combustion actually occurs and why. Like, nobody can, like, I can explain it, but I can't explain it in like excruciating detail or with the math, behind it. And same goes for money. Same goes for value. People will just gravitate to where value is. Like, well said. And so it fixes itself as long as you just have the medium that can't be cheated, that is not vulnerable to the same bug, to the same exploit that destroyed the last one. And the exploit of fiat is simply that the people who own it are going to print it.
So I guess where I was thinking about AI in this connection to TradFi.
Yeah, I was curious. Yeah, I was going to ask that.
Is how disruptive it's going to be to identity, KYC, AML, etc. Right?
Gotcha.
So because when
kind of from the authentication perspective.
Yeah, and when I go down when I go down the rabbit hole you're describing, that's all based on trust. Yeah. Because somebody has to trust that those numbers we're issuing on paper and sending overseas to purchase those goods and services, they need to trust that that's legit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And or if you're a corporation, you need to trust that payment's going to settle. So I see lots, basically from the work that I've heard you talk about before, I see lots of disruption coming at an incredibly fast pace. And I don't understand how TradFi is going to adapt to this quick enough.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a really interesting dynamic because like we're getting to the point where like it's not that difficult to live change somebody's face on video. Certainly not difficult to live change their voice, especially if you happen to have a podcast with hundreds of hours of audio to make like a really professional model to mimic you. But you don't even need that anymore. Like I did one yesterday, just experimenting with a meme that I'm screwing around with, and I had 20 seconds audio, and it was good enough to be like, oh, that's the same voice, and that's only the thing is that this is the worst it's ever going to be, and I was using open source tools. I wasn't even using like the high end kind of proprietary tools for this very thing. And generative AI is really interesting from when I went down the AI rabbit hole, again, like why I made the AI Unchained podcast is just because like part of me was, I was really worried. I'll admit I was really, really
Yeah.
worried that we were going to be in these giant centralized platforms with basically contextual awareness and being able to do like NSA, like platform level spying on a scale and with as little resources as possible in a way that like straight up 1984 in a way that was like hard to comprehend. Um, and the fact that ChatGPT, everybody talked about like, oh, you can't do AI on anything unless you have billions of dollars worth of GPU processing power and all of this stuff. Like it worried me. It really worried me when this all first started. But then I started to see like it slowly was coming to the surface that like the compute was not efficient enough and the result wasn't good enough to actually be maintained. Like every time you asked ChatGPT a question, it was like a nickel. It costs like 8 cents, up to 8 cents, which is crazy. Like that's an enormous amount for like per interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And at the exact same time, what generative AI did and what a lot of the tools make possible is basically the inability to know whether or not anybody is human. Is we've come to this point where we can mimic the digital version of humans ex- incredibly well, like incredibly well. There are
Mm-hmm.
so many just out of description video created, like not even like based on something else. If you have like a framework of a video, like if you have like somebody talking and you want to change their mouth or change their face into somebody else's, there are incredibly good tools at doing that. There's a bunch of different, like there's a image of this used to take a lot of Photoshop skill, to do this.
Right.
Not anymore. It's not even slightly hard. In fact, there's open source tools completely for free that you can do. You just put a picture of the face you want and you click on the face in the thing because it's got object identification. It can see the faces. And then you just tell it to go. And then after about 5 seconds of processing, it puts one face on another face. And there's like a picture of like Diddy and uh, Kanye, I think maybe I can't remember, but a couple of them all about the pedophilia and rape stuff that's been going on,
Uh-huh.
and somebody has superimposed J Lo's face on some girl in the image, and like community
Right.
notes keep
I
posting
saw
it, and
that.
it's like this is not J Lo. Look at the original image, and they'll link to the original image. But like
Right.
that's so easy to do, and it's so quick to spread stuff
Right.
like that because it's engaging. It's like, oh my god, that's like a big deal. So I'm going to retweet it really quick. Um, and This is kind of it's the world that we're going in, and in when you have a financial system, when you have payment systems that are all pull based, that's the big thing. This is the fundamental difference that makes Bitcoin compatible and the fiat financial system incompatible with where we're headed. Is the fiat system is entirely pull based, which means that you give every amount of capacity, every authentication and authority to someone else to yank money from your account. And then you trust that they're only going to yank the amount that you tell them. And very often they don't. They pull more amounts. You cancel you have it's too difficult to cancel your subscription. They love that power. That's why we're on a subscription based system, because they want you to forget about stuff. They want to pull that $10 payment for 4 months before you realize you've been paying for this thing that you haven't
Mm-hmm.
logged into, and then you have to go cancel it because you can't just turn it off. You have to go to the service. You have to hit. You have to go through the menu, and they hide it. They make it
Mm-hmm.
really inconvenient to do so that if you're in the middle of something else, you're going to stop halfway through. It's just $10. I'll do this tomorrow. Um, I can't tell you how many times like I literally cannot find where to cancel some sort of a service.
Been there. Yep.
And then when you finally do, it's like 5 steps, and then you have to like cancel. You have to confirm via your email. It's like, dude, I want you to not pay me. How is it that I have less power over this than you? That's crazy. And that system requires that you identify who you are working with. KYC, like not KYC AML, but like literally like knowing who you are doing business with is a requirement because it is permissioned. Cash is the opposite of that.
Right.
The whole point of money, one of the core concepts of money, is that you can trust the money instead of having to trust the other person. When everything is based on credit and everything is based on permission, you literally lose the foundation that makes money money.
Yeah,
Like the whole point of
100%. And
yeah,
I was just gonna say, it goes. I totally understand the angle that you're coming from with the pull. It also can be pulled back. We
exactly.
we we have
Yeah.
these issues in regards to settlement on Bitcoin transactions,
Mm-hmm.
and that you just took a fiat payment and you delivered a instant settlement bearer asset of Bitcoin, and then that fiat payment can be pulled back,
Yeah.
and you're not taking that Bitcoin back. So this incompatibility between the two, I don't even want to call fiat a technology, but between the
It
two
is.
is,
It is.
yeah,
It's a
it is to a
technology
certain
with a
degree.
horrible flaw, but you think about it, like we couldn't have gotten where we are without fiat
Sure,
because you can't
sure,
send gold over the internet. You know,
yeah,
like it's a band-aid. It's a
right.
band-aid with a really big problem.
Really
And
big problem.
we just never
Doesn't,
technologically solved it until Bitcoin.
right. It's not
Mm.
keeping up with the pace of economic transactions. It's not keeping up with the pace of fraud. It's not keeping up with uh, the pace or lack of trust in the system.
Yeah.
Um, so to me, like, what you triggered a thought in my mind a while ago, which was that um, this could become an issue for corporations just here in the United States, because so many corporations deliver goods and services in near real time, but those fiat transactions could be reversed.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in some cases, best case scenario within a few days, worst case scenario up to 90 days later. And what kind of ramifications do you see for just the U.S. based companies as this sort of transaction fraud scales up through AI?
Yeah, I was about to say the big thing about the cost element here is, if you have one person doing this occasionally here and there, you just eat the cost, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something like $3 billion or something, which has grown every single year. I don't think the statistic for a very long time has significantly gone down during any period. It just continues to get higher and higher. Um, uh, in just fraud and chargebacks and people stealing credit cards and info and impersonating them online or getting their phone number and resetting things, SIM swap kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just kind of taken as a cost of doing business. But that cost increasingly gets bigger and bigger the more direct, the faster, and the more expensive your service is. And as the economy becomes more and more digital, that's necessarily the case. That we have more digital services, and we have more digital services that are more valuable. They are doing more and providing more value. And one of the interesting things about AI is that it turns so many, really the term is linguistic. It's problems of language and translation into pure compute problems. So suddenly services that required a human or required a a translator, and this can literally mean from English language to Python, from JavaScript to C, like LLMs, their fundamental mode, like they are translators of patterns in human language. It's a giant probability machine that just has enough compute to mimic what appears to be real intelligence, but it's not intelligence in like a sentient sense, and a lot of people misunderstand that. Like you can go, if you really like break down the like fine-tuned details of these things, like you can play with the probability and you can get all sorts of like play with these tools, and you'll see, you'll begin to actually understand them. The best introduction recommend to people is uh, the it's called A Gentle Introduction into Large Language Models, I believe. And I read it as like one of the very early things on the podcast for AI Unchained. And it basically breaks down the mathematical models. Like, okay, how do we get from this to numbers, to being able to do math, to being able to build a model, and then to be able to pull back out this information back out. And it's basically just patterns between words in certain locations and the words at the rest of those locations that's literally so deep and has so much compute behind it that you can build a model big enough that mimics all of the dominant patterns of human language. And you see this kind of same thing in chess. Like, it seems like there's an infinite number of possibilities, right? I can't remember what the relevant math is. I've read it in a book recently, but they're like the number of possible chess moves is like, I don't know, like a 20 trillion. I mean, I'm just pulling that out of my butt, but it's an enormous number. But then the number of possible moves that are actually relevant to a game and would actually be useful during a game is like 0.02% of the entire space. You know, like, so many of them are just random nonsense. Like, it's just noise. The signal in it is so small, but even that space is still really large. But that's why you can create a probability machine that will actually just know and understand what's useful and can actually mirror or continue the pattern of the chess game, and why we ended up building a supercomputer that can beat everybody in the world at chess. And it's just better at humans. And it's a pure numbers game. It's just brute forcing it. And we've basically done the exact same thing with language. Like, the number of possible combinations of words and verbs and all of this stuff is practically infinite. But the number of combinations of words that make sense is like 0.001% of that. Like, it's a tiny, tiny portion of the whole scope of what is in the human language. And so it pulls out those patterns. And in doing so, like, we can literally mimic intelligence. It's a mirror that translates those patterns, and all of those patterns exist in all types of data. So it will translate from literally English to pixels when you do an image generation model. Like, it's like, okay, well, what pattern, when you say cat, what patterns of pixels look like cats? You know, how many of these images have the word cat in them, or are described with the word cat? And then it literally goes through and just looks at all of the pixels of all of those images, and of the arrangements. Sure, there's a cat on a boat. There's a cat sitting in front of a window. There's a cat on the deck. Like, and so all of these pixels are different every single time. But out of that, there is this pattern that keeps kind of showing up. This relationship of pixels that mean cat. And if you compute enough of these images for what a cat looks like, you can then later, it's like this super, super compression algorithm where you can actually pull the images back out, but you can pull the relationship between this pixel and this pixel based on the word that you put in. And somehow it just so happens that with enough compute, you can make a thing that doesn't exist anywhere, and it just looks like a picture of a cat that you've seen 1,000 times. And so ultimately, the entire job of LLMs is translation. But because of that, everything in the internet is just digital. It's all digital. It's all just data. It's all numbers and text. Every bit of it. This video right now, just numbers.
Yeah.
My voice, just numbers. Right? Just zeros and ones, really. And to an LLM or an image generation model or whatever, none of that is any different. That's why you can make a model for literally anything digital. You can get it to generate actions on a computer screen. You can get it to generate images and video and text and code, because it doesn't care. It's literally doing math on ones and zeros and just establishing patterns. They can be locations of pixels just as easily as they can be words. It doesn't know. It doesn't care. Like, it's just pulling out relationships. And because of that, we literally have lost the ability to define what a human is online. Because in a very short period of time, practically already, like we're going to be in this constant race of trying to figure out how to get humans to do things to prove that they're human online that computers can't do. And I think we'll truly get to a point where there just won't be a distinction.
Right.
Like
Man,
you
that,
will
I mean,
never know if you're actually dealing with a human. If
yeah.
you have a permissioned KYC based service that's 2,000 miles away, what's your tool? How do you know you're talking to a human? How do you know
When
they're not totally invented? How do you know
yeah.
they didn't just buy a ID off the dark web and then use that image to just put it over their face? You know, you get a
Yeah.
picture of somebody's ID. If it's a pull system, if you're not waiting for them to authorize the transaction, but you are doing it, like I just see that is a fundamental disconnect. Like that's
Right.
a very low level disconnect, and I don't know how you fix it. I don't think it's fixable.
We've talked a lot about this internally, and because we operate an ATM network,
Mm-hmm.
one of the ways we've tried to solve this is that we could physically send somebody to a designated ATM, geolocate them in front of that ATM, collect their image, ask them to perform certain tasks
Mm-hmm.
in front of an ATM that we sent them to. And so it does add a new factor of that we know this human had to go out of their way to go stand in front of this ATM and
Mm-hmm.
interact with it. Um, but there's on the day to day, it's incredibly difficult. It's becoming more and more difficult to understand the difference between who's human and who isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Who We're doing everything we can on our ATMs to try and mix up the questions that we're asking them, mix up the interface so that somebody can't be trained, or an artificial intelligence could not be trained to interact with the ATM because it's going to be different every time they touch the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but at the end of the day, it becomes like this AI arms race, right?
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
and at the pace that AI can iterate, I mean, can we as humans expect to even win in that arms race?
I mean, I think yes, but not in the fiat world. I think it's only just by we can only fix the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Like I do not envy the task of running. I'm in fact actually I'm curious how much fraud and stuff do you get? Like I imagine physical ATMs like in the real world are much better than like taking a credit card. Like that's one of the things like so
Yes.
many people in the past have always said when I would try to onboard people, be like, dude, they're like taking 10% to let me buy with a
Right.
credit card. Like, why is this so hard? Bitcoin sucks. I'm like, nah, dude, you don't understand. Fiat sucks.
Yeah.
Your credit card system sucks. Every bit of fraud, every bit of problem, every bit of cost is on the fiat side. The problem is that Bitcoin is too good. You're misunderstanding where the problem
Yes.
is,
Exactly right.
you know?
Yeah,
Um,
we had that. We tried to introduce credit card purchases on the ATMs, and the fraud was
mm-hmm.
so significant that we discontinued it.
Dang.
Um, with cash for Bitcoin, at least you have two bearer instruments,
Mm-hmm.
but we still are doing as much as possible to prevent um, our customers from being scammed. And I'll
Yeah.
give you a classic example. A prime target, and this is this is not to insult any generation, but a prime target seems to be people over 60.
Yeah.
And many of the scams that we see at the ATM would be people over 60 falling for a lover boy scam or a lover girl scam, or hey, somebody is fixing my computer and they will only take Bitcoin, and so we go out of our way to, number one, confirm that the wallet you're sending the Bitcoin to is yours, that you're not sending
Mm-hmm.
it to somebody else's wallet,
Oh,
that
man.
that
Yeah.
wallet, even if you say it's yours, that wallet hasn't been used in scams before. But we all know in Bitcoin that you can quickly change your wallet address.
Um,
Um,
if you just
we
generate a new address, like there's no
Right,
connection to another one,
yeah.
Yeah.
We will, if it's a user that's been at the ATM before, we'll show a picture of them from their previous interaction with the ATM. Like, is this you? And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that'll scare a fraudster away. We'll do things
Interesting.
like
Okay.
change up the interface. So if they've been coached to do something, that it'll confuse them. And then anybody.
Actually on that, there
Mhm.
might actually be a clever trick. If you can actually pull up a previous interaction, you could do a simple AI check to see if the face looks
Yes.
similarity in the face. I'm not,
Yes.
may do that. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, we do something similar to that.
Okay, cool.
We also, anybody over 60 gets a direct phone call while they're in front of the ATM, while they're on
Yeah.
camera, so they have to answer the call. And we talk through all the different scams with them to make sure that they're not getting scammed. And through all these efforts, that our data shows and what we've presented to a number of regulators to try and get them to understand the process, and to be better at fighting crime, because we interface with regulatory agencies and crime fighting agencies all the time to try and benefit their crime fighting capability. We're able to basically turn away 84% of the transactions on anybody over 60 years old. That's our
Wow.
data. So
84.
84% get
Wow.
either discover it's a scam and decide not to do the transaction, or will
It's just not right. It's just not true or something.
or they
Yeah.
get nervous, or they're not
hmm
comfortable with it, and because we have literally had people on these calls with our customer service department, which is a US based customer service department right here in Florida, say to us, I know, but I still want to send this person money. It's like, well, we can't let you do that. I mean, we've literally had people tell us that. Um, so about 84% of
What?
60-year-olds and up. Yeah. So you could point out to somebody that, you're sending money to this person in a foreign country, and this is highly probably a scam, most likely a scam. And they said, I know, but I enjoy talking to this person and I want to send them money.
Wow.
So there is a sense of
Wow.
like, I don't care that I'm losing money. Like, this person
Yeah.
makes me feel good. This person is like communicating with me and I have a relationship, and they're
What
getting
a
some.
testament to
Yeah. Isn't that
like
really interesting?
human connection.
Yes.
There's
Yeah.
probably just so many elderly that are just so lonely.
Yeah. It's
God,
really,
that's sad. That's really
it is
sad.
very sad. It's very sad. But we have other people that give us glowing testimonies of, thank you so much. It goes the other way too, because they
hmm
just were really not aware of what was happening.
hmm
Everything is so new, the technology is so new, and they get confused. So yeah, we're always pushing that envelope to try and make sure that everybody who touches the ATM is doing a transaction for themselves, to benefit themselves, and not to the benefit of somebody else. Um, but we are in a much better position that we have somebody physically standing in front of the ATM.
hmm
In the mobile wallet, where we've had payments in the past, it was much more difficult to stop those bad transactions, and
hmm
we got abused significantly. Now we're relaunching that. We'll have purchases, in-app purchases now in our mobile wallet, coming back here in about the next 3 weeks to a month, with a whole new suite of AI tools and identity tools and balance checking tools. The phone numbers is a huge mess, as
Yeah.
you're probably aware. I mean, how
Yeah.
many times do you get a call from a local area code, and even with a name from like a local company or something like that, and you
hmm
pick it up and it's not that at all.
If you're not in my contacts, I mostly just don't answer.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Except when you have a hurricane and you have an insurance claim and you're getting
Yeah,
calls
yeah,
for
yeah.
50
Then
million.
you have to know. You have to know that.
You have to.
Yeah,
We have, like, right now, there's so many of us dealing with hurricane damage. We have to pick up every call because
yeah,
we don't want to miss that important call from an underwriter
yeah.
or an agent or whatever.
That's funny.
But yeah, the phone numbers is a huge issue, because there doesn't seem to be any that I'm aware of, any diligent effort to prevent anybody from setting up any phone number, using it temporarily, and then vanishing. So we do a
hmm
lot there. Like, if you have not had your phone number for a long time, you're a highly suspicious character, right? And
hmm
we'll just block you. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's an arms race, right? So That,
That's got to be, God, I do not envy that task, because like what you, and this is like such a great example of what I think is going to happen and what we've seen happen to platforms,
mm,
you know, like even Twitter's KYC basically now.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And you essentially don't get the same experience if you don't pay.
mm-hmm.
Um, and I think what's going to increasingly happen is that like people who interface with fiat, especially people with Bitcoin on the other side of it, like you guys, um, are the process is going to have so many different layers and get stacked over and over and over again for like things that people have to do, or like a process. Like the UX is just going to get harder and harder to make
Yeah,
seamless.
that's such a
Um,
hard. It's such a hard fight because you want to
Super hard
make,
balance. Yeah.
yeah, you want to make the UX as simple as possible so that your users enjoy the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but at the same time, I mean, we know what the we know what the answers are to this, and
Yeah.
we'll
Yeah. We know
get
what the
there.
answers are. Yeah.
We
Yeah.
know what the answer is, but I mean, just talking about the kind of the way it exists today, um, you know, are a bit like we'll do a KYC on someone at the ATM, and we know we have a higher probability of proving that person's identity than if they came through a banking app.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, a bank will not accept our KYC of that individual as proof. They have to do it
Mm-hmm.
themselves, right? So what are you going to, KYC at the ATM,
Mm-hmm.
KYC at our banking provider, KYC if you want to access an investment portfolio in the, like, et cetera, et cetera. And that just destroys the UX because people want to log in once and have
Mm-hmm.
access to everything within that application. So, um, we struggle with that all the time. It's like, how can we share data? How can we deliver that identity as a token that even just everybody, especially as we move with this interface, we cross from Bitcoin to TradFi, and and but we have a TradFi organization, like we have to do it ourselves. We cannot accept your identity token. Um, and I know there's a lot of companies that have been working on this for a lot of time that have great solutions, but it seems to me like it's going to be hard to get that implemented until the system is so broken that they have no choice.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how
Yeah.
you feel about that.
I think the implementation will happen slowly, and it will just be competition. Like a great example is basically what platforms have been having to put people through, um, and what platforms that end up using Bitcoin will be able to do. And I mean, like, there's so many different things. Like, I would love to have a phone number. I would love to have two phone numbers. One, my normal public phone number,
Mm-hmm.
and then one, a phone number that you can't call me unless you pay 100 sats.
Right.
And I would answer one of those phone numbers every single time, and then I would only answer contacts on the other, and I would block
Right.
everything else.
That's a great
Um,
idea.
and uh, and that's really what I think the secret sauce is like, in my thinking, is that you're going to have two different ones, and the experience is just going to be so much different on the other one. I made a post, I don't know, like 6 months, a year ago now, but it was when I was finally getting into using a bunch of different Nostr based services, and I had fully gone in with like the Albi extension, and I was basically just logging in with um, NIP05. I was logging in with the extension uh, into a bunch of different services, and I had like 7 different Nostr things open at once. So I was on Primal, I think Oracle too, just because of a thing about how they like could arrange their interface or their feed, so I could have these both next to each other. I was on Stacker News, which was Nostr based. Um, I think it was highlighter.com. Like, it just like literally just like 5 or 6 different services. And every single time I went to one, it just pops up, says, "Do you want to log in?" It says, "Okay." And that's it. Like, that was my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And every single time, I didn't know usernames and passwords, no LastPass thing, no having to store it in this like weird like middleman system of managing a bunch of different things. I had keys on my side, and I simply signed to prove that it was me. And am I a person? They don't care. Like, they have authentication, and nobody has to pull payment from me. If I zap somebody, I zap them. I push it from my side. So the entire experience, and I was talking to where was, oh no, I was, it was the talk. It was the talk I gave at BitBlock Boom, and we were having one of the dinners, and I was talking to this guy who was doing merchant services with fiat and Bitcoin. And he listened to my talk, and then we bumped back into each other at the dinner after. And he was like, dude, I listened to the talk and I could not believe I was literally like writing down notes while you were talking. Because it was all about AI and Bitcoin and the fraud that was blowing up. And he said, I've never really thought about this, but I just looked up all my stats and I did the math, and I wanted to find you and talk to you about this. He said, but like I was just looking at our fraud, because we think about this like heavily on the fiat side of like, okay, how do we charge this? What's IP address is it from? How do we know when not to take the payment or to send them up an error or make them go some other loop or give them a captcha? And like they go through all of this process, and they've still had like, it was like 18% was fraud. Like they just has to constantly either deal with chargebacks, or that they have to reject, or like just there's just this huge subset of cost on the fiat side that amounts to almost a fifth of everything that they do just to keep the thing running. And then he was like, I didn't think we had, but I had to look just because I never framed it this way in my mind. But I just looked, and there's nothing on the Bitcoin side. We just implemented Bitcoin and Lightning, and then we just take payments. Like there's nothing. We don't captcha anything. We don't like it's a complete non-issue, to the point that you had to say it out loud that it was a non-issue for me to realize, because it was so out of mind in how we run our business. And when you have those two, when the difference is that big, think about what that means if you have a business that accepts let's just call it a fifth. Let's call it 20%, because eventually it's going to be 20%. Like I think it's just going to get worse and worse and worse until it breaks. If you have 20% cost just for accepting fiat, and this isn't even an issue. In fact, you can send your support people home on the Bitcoin side, or your fraud department, can cut their hours in half. Well, then why wouldn't you put a 10% discount to get people to pay in Bitcoin?
Right.
You still have a 10% margin, a 10% margin on top of your margin, because you don't have to pay for the fraud. You don't have to deal with it. And going back to the scenario with Nostr, so I was logging into all these things, and then I can't remember what it was exactly, but I had to get into my Gmail for some reason. And it wasn't related to Nostr. It was something else that I was doing. It was like some service that I had, and I had to log in with Gmail to get like a confirmation or to do something. And I had not used my Gmail account in a long time. It's just like a throwaway thing that I put into services that I don't want to give my real email address to. And so I was like, oh my God. Like it was the first barrier I had hit all morning, because I've been just on Nostr stuff. And then I was like, okay, I'll jump over to my Gmail, and I was like, open up LastPass. And I have like a bunch of stuff with Gmail in it. So it's like, okay, which one is this? Okay, it's this one. And I punch in the username and password, and it says, we have to confirm that you're human. Do this captcha. I was like, oh my God. And I'm like doing the captcha. And then it says, please do another captcha. And I'm like, okay, I was doing the captcha. And then it says, we need to confirm that you are who owns this account. We sent a confirmation code to your backup email address. My backup email address wasn't a Gmail address. And so I went to that one. We need to confirm you're human. Do this captcha. We need to confirm you're human still. Do this captcha. We sent this to your backup email address. Like, I shit you not, this went 4 confirmations deep and 8 captchas deep. And then I had to go back after I finally got into an email account that I hadn't used in like 8 years, because I've cascaded from my old email as my backup to the new email to the new one. And I went through this crazy process and then cascaded all the way back. It's like I was creating a lightning transaction through a bunch of hops and then having to confirm them all the way back down the line. And finally got back to the thing just to get the confirmation code to log into the service, to get the one piece of information I needed. And it took like 18 minutes. Like It took almost like a third of an hour. I was like, what is wrong with this? And I went back over to, I'm like on Noster or whatever. It's like, I just logged into like 6 different things and I zapped 20 different times this morning on multiple platforms. I had no passwords, no captchas, no confirmations, no email, no nothing. I didn't even need an email address. I generated a key on my side and I could, the entire scope, the entire ecosystem I can work with frictionlessly. And I needed one piece of information from the legacy system, and it took me like 20 minutes. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my shit. Like there was a vessel in my head that was sticking out at least for an hour after that thing. And I was just like, this is where we're headed. You know, like that is a microcosm of the problem that AI is, and the problem of not being able to authenticate humans online in a digital environment. If you can authenticate via keys, then you can, and all payments are push, you literally have none of these problems.
You have none of it.
You have none of it. It's crazy.
So it's so frustrating because it's literally just a matter of getting everybody to hold keys.
Yeah.
In order to be able to fix this. But
survival of the fittest.
Simultaneously, you have the powers that be that are petrified of everybody holding their own keys.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's no going back. There's no other way. It's literally either dystopia or hold your own keys. Like, because it's just going to keep getting worse and more KYC'd and more permissioned and more come into the building and scan your eyeballs to get your global ID
it's
card.
Horrific.
And then only scan your global ID card physically. Like it's going to get that bad because there's no other option. It won't work otherwise.
It's literally like the red pill, blue pill matrix decision. Do you 100%. Want to enter the dystopian surveillance society, or just hold your private keys and take control of yourself and your data and your identity and your sovereignty? And you know, with that like no better illustration ever in life that with great freedom comes
great
responsibility.
That's right.
You take on the responsibility of holding your keys, and you can live this incredible free sovereign life, or give everything up to the mass surveillance, you know, dystopia society, and you're literally checking yourself into the corral and not getting out.
Yeah.
So it's like, so when I don't know, I guess there's just a lot of people out there that haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, it's not a coincidence. And I've talked about this before on the show and with other people. But freedom is responsibility.
Yep.
And I think people have, especially in the political world and the fiat mindset, they think freedom is being able to do what you want to do. And that's not at all what it is. It's literally not at all what it is. And they think it's like, oh, freedom is selfish. It's like, no, freedom is responsibility. If you are free to have any medical care that you want to look for or to provide whatever medical care, means that you're responsible for choosing it. You're responsible for its quality. You're responsible for who you trust. Like, you are responsible for you. Freedom is not, I do what I want. Freedom is, I am responsible for myself, and I do not push that responsibility. I do not push an obligation onto anybody else. It's mine. If I make a mistake, it's mine. You know,
and this is where Bitcoin is so much more than money, because it does represent a fork, and it represents a fork in the road, a fork for humanity, a fork in our timeline as a species. Of, are you going to choose to take responsibility for yourself and your actions, or not?
Mm-hmm.
And man, if you choose wisely, you seem to be being rewarded immensely, and building a beautiful future. And if you choose wrong, you could be entering into something that you're never coming out of.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's crazy though. It's crazy where we're headed.
Let's talk about some of the hopeful stuff then.
Yeah. Well, I think it's hopeful just in like I don't want to be, you know, make it seem like I'm black pilled or something.
Right.
Like, when the choice becomes obvious, it's an easy choice, and I think most people will choose right, but
Yeah.
it's kind of the process of evolution. If the environment changes dramatically, um, you
Hmm.
either adapt to what the environment demands, or the environment kills you. And
Yeah.
that will be true of financial everything, of cultural and social and political, and that might mean that we're tied to a common fate, and you better hope that your neighbors choose the same, or you
Yeah.
make sure
Yeah.
you use the tech and the tools to
Yeah.
protect yourself from that.
I
um,
think this is why so many of us as Bitcoiners get called like, oh, you're in a cult, or you're
yeah.
the water cooler guy who never shuts up about Bitcoin. But it all comes in my mind from a place of love for humanity, because we for whatever reason we got to this fork a little bit sooner.
Mm-hmm.
We decided that this was super important to go make the right turn, and then we're standing there like, you got to go to the right, take the right
Yeah,
turn,
yeah, yeah.
and we're yelling at these people, or trying to educate them, and trying to show them as much as we can. And a lot of times people are just walking right by like, this is the preacher on the corner and I don't want to hear this.
Mm-hmm.
But I
The
think it
end
all
is
comes from
nigh.
it all comes from a place of love, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the end is nigh. Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. I don't
But
know,
yeah, it's
man.
just uh, it's painful to watch, and this is like largely everybody's perspective in some way, shape, or form.
Mm.
Is everybody's certain that they're the ones that are right?
That's
Um,
true. That's true. Good point.
but it's also hard to be right for a really long time and over and over and over again, and to still see people pretending like it doesn't matter, or dismissing
Mm-hmm.
it,
Mm-hmm.
or just being like, you got lucky.
Yes.
And it's like, I don't think you understand how hard that luck was.
Yeah.
you, you
Yeah.
know, like the luck was the
Yes.
opposite of it. Like if you're just going, and it's also important too, if you're just as a frame of reference, if you're going through an incredibly tumultuous time where there is like massive shifts and
Who
big
who would be
bills coming
dealing with
due,
that right now?
I don't know.
I
I don't
don't
know.
know.
But if you're just kind of going along with the group to go along
Yeah.
with the group, you are destined for disaster, because the change is explicitly at odds with quote unquote normal.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
the conformists win every time, until there is a fundamental shift and conformity is incompatible with the new world.
I think AI is like fuel on this fire, because
100%. 100%. Yeah.
we're talking about the little, not, I don't even want to call it a little bit, but the amount of disruption we've seen from AI so far, the amount of disruption we've seen from technology so far for a wide swath of people, is only going to accelerate.
Mm-hmm.
And in the as soon as you figure out a change, it's changing again. And so, like, how do people become comfortable with disruption, so that they can sort of maintain a steady state in this evolution of all this new tech that's going to be coming in our future?
I would say we've we've reached a point in the acceleration of technology specifically where, if you think this is going to be a 1940s 1950s economy where you go get a career and you do one thing, and then that's just the thing that you do for your life, that was a transition period to a massive acceleration phase. I don't think we ever I think the cycles are just going to be so short that, the chart where like a new technology comes out and it shows like how quickly it becomes adopted, and then it like, it's an S
Plateaus.
curve. It like
Yeah.
gradually like evens out as it reaches saturation, and you see that on that technology chart, and you see it get steeper and steeper and steeper and steeper, and then it's like straight up, like it's just crazy.
Yeah.
Well, what I think we're going to have, if you just kind of zoom in on a log chart, the time spans, it starts looking like the normal S curve again. Like you just have to change, you have to knock off a
Yeah.
zero, and
Right.
rather than looking at years, you look at quarters, and then rather than looking at quarters, you look at weeks. Like they just get smaller and smaller the time frame, but the chart can look the same. You just log chart it out, and I actually think that's going to be the norm. And what I think we're going to see as technology accelerates in the whole price of tomorrow kind of context. For anybody who's read that book, if you haven't read that book, you should definitely read that book. Price of Tomorrow, Jeff Booth.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that. But when you think about the expansion and acceleration of technology, is what I think you're going to have is you're going to have layers of disruption on top of each other, where whole phases of disruption are going to be disrupted while they're still disrupting. Like basically the S curves are going to overlap in the same industries and in the same areas and in the same technology. So like imagine it like, we have desktop computers and then mobile phones, and then let's say you have, I don't know, a brain chip or something. It's a stupid example, but you just have these eras of technology that change, or maybe for simplicity's sake, desktop, cell phone, and then smartphone. Um, and they don't really overlap, right? Like
Yeah.
desktop comes and reaches maturity, and then you get cell phones. It's like, oh, okay, so things are changing, and then it starts to reach maturity, and everybody's got one, and then smartphones happen. Well, I think we're reaching a point of acceleration where desktop is still happening, and again, this is kind of physical hardware, so it's not like a perfect analogy, but
Yeah.
where one technological shift is happening and the other one starts before this one's even done. Like the next layer of the technology is already the speed and ability to make use of one disruptive technology becomes so easy, and so the feedback becomes so strong on all the previous layers that the next thing is already happening that's disrupting the thing that still hasn't even been saturated. And then as they both start to increase, then the third one happens. So you'll literally get this widening gap between the people who adapt to new technology the fastest and the people who basically are still just using the one that's the biggest in its biggest zone of
Yeah.
disruption,
Right.
so that like literally the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. That distribution is going to get wider and wider, but where it literally seems like people are living 50 years apart in time, where
Yeah.
one group literally has no idea what's going on and another group has already adopted and utilized the technology that is disrupting them, and is now adopting and using the technology that is disrupting the technology that they were using to disrupt the other. Like it's just going to continue to cascade and get layers upon layers of this. And I just think this is the normal future. Like stability is just, we just have to get used to disruption. Disruption is going to be the norm. If you're not disrupting, you're not going to have a business plan. And I mean that's a bit of a broad general statement. But I think it's a limit, right? That statement's never really true, but it will get closer and closer to true as technology continues to accelerate more and more. Adapting is the only thing that we should be doing. We shouldn't be thinking about a 50-year job or thing, because it's just in 50 years, you have no idea what it's going to look like. In
Right.
10 years, you might have no idea what it looks like. Um,
At
and
that, I mean, at that pace, there's absolutely no way a regulatory body or a financial
Exactly.
crimes enforcement unit can keep pace.
No, it has to
And
be decentralized to
it
actually
has to
adapt
be.
fast enough.
It has to. You literally have to push the decision making and the credentialing down to the individual so that
Mm-hmm.
they can, like you said earlier, make the choice. Am I going to push my information to participate in this or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they have to take full responsibility for their actions.
Mm-hmm.
That's a totally different playing field than, oh well,
What we
if
think.
I make
Yeah.
a mistake, someone will come rescue me.
Mm-hmm. And I will give a little bit of hope on the AI front, just
Okay.
for general. Is I don't think, I read a piece by what's his first name? Something Aschenbrenner, called uh state. It's about AGI. It's about the perspective of 10 years out and
Yeah.
trying to just expand out the orders of magnitude for AI research. And basically saying that we're going to have artificial general intelligence, and we're going to have a LLM that you can basically just put into a position of any human, and it will just do all of their jobs, and there's nothing we can do. Um, it was a really strong argument purely because it was math. Like it was that he didn't say this is going to be the way we're going to fix the algorithms. This is the way we're going to improve this, et cetera, et cetera. It's like if we just take the last 10 years worth of exponential improvement and we just lay it over the next 10, that's just what we see. That's just where we will end up. So the question is, do you trust the trend? Like, is Moore's law Moore's law or not? Because this is 2 orders of magnitude every, I think it was every year or every 2 years. I don't know. But it was an extremely aggressive. It was basically a Moore's law on top of Moore's law. Like it was far faster than we're used to seeing technology move, which completely reinforces that whole technological feedback, right? Is the technological environment makes the new technology faster at iterating. But I also think it runs out faster too. You know, it took like, what was it? It's probably like 30, 40 years or something like that for Moore's law to basically run its course until we just could not make transistors. Like we couldn't make the chip smaller. And so we had to open up into this whole new, we basically had like a bunch of really inefficient chip designs that now had to change the way we thought about chip design. And then you suddenly get unified memory. Then you split up CPUs and GPUs. Like you just change how you think about the architecture to get the low hanging fruit when you get to the end of Moore's law acceleration. And again, it's an S curve. It's an S curve. I think we're hitting the LLM S curve really, really fast. And we may be hitting it sooner rather than later. Just out of the sheer cost of compute for these things. And also something that I talked about recently on, I guess like 3 or 4 episodes ago on AI Unchained, is that I don't care about using ChatGPT or Claude anymore. Like those are the big proprietary models. And I have mostly been using nothing but Llama 3.1, which is the open source one, because it's way cheaper, and I can't tell the difference. Like I can't tell the difference. Now, on some crazy, ridiculous benchmark, you might be able to tell me that Claude is better at code, or ChatGPT is better at long form written content. But I don't want something to just, I don't want to offload what I'm doing. I want to do what I'm doing. I just want it to help me in the way that I need it to shortcut my work or to summarize the thing or pull out the links from my episodes. You know, like I don't need it to, like, what's, you know, everybody's talking about like, oh, when AI is better than us, it's going to replace us. It's like, but who's going to pay for AI that is so much smarter than them that they can't discern whether it's good or not? You know, like if something is 10 times as smart as you versus twice as smart as you, are you going to pay 10 times the cost? No, you're just going to do the cheap. You can't even tell if it's 10 or 2.
Right.
You
That's
know?
a good point. Yeah.
Like it's like playing against somebody who's better than you at chess. They just win. You know, like you don't care whether they're the best chess player in the world. The result of the game is the same, whether they're a little bit better or a lot. And in that sense, like I don't like if ChatGPT has some super fundamentally better results by some crazy benchmark. I don't care about any of those benchmarks. I care about doing what I'm trying to do and getting an LLM that can just help me accomplish those tasks easily. And because of that, I likened it to the race for better graphics in video games. Is for like 15 years, you grew up, you know, we're same generation, right? Ish. And so we grew up during the video gaming era where every new video game console was like better graphics, better graphics, better graphics. You know, it was like the thing for 15 years was about, oh my God, 2D with like twice as many pixels. Oh my God, 3D video games. Yeah. Oh my God, this looks real. Oh my God, I thought that looked real. This looks real. You know, like it just was every single time the new console was about better graphics. And then like 2002, 2003 came around and like everybody was like, you know, putting out new videos for games and like cutscenes and like cinematics and stuff. And it's like, oh, this is even better. But like, I don't know. The other one was pretty good too. Like, it's not that much better.
At some point, it comes about you can only incrementally improve the graphics so much until it becomes more about the story and the
It hits
game
the
and
S
the
curve, and
yeah.
it's just about gameplay. And it's so much about gameplay now that people just like retro graphics. You can have a game that
Mm-hmm.
has garbage graphics kind of on purpose for the point of an
Yeah.
art style, and
Right.
people love it. Nobody
Right.
cares about graphics anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Nobody cares.
That's
And the
interesting.
PlayStation 6 isn't going to boast that their graphics are twice as good as the last one. They're not. What do they care about? The scope of the game. How long can I play it? How good is the story? How engaging is the player to player combat? You know, it's about the game, which was always the point. The graphics were just
Yeah.
actually there to make the game a little bit more immersive. And after you reach the point where it's just immersive, well, then you have to focus on something else because the graphics just become non-existent or irrelevant to the point of the game. LLMs, I think, are going to do the same thing. I
That
think
this
there's actually going to be a huge bear market in AI. I think OpenAI is going to go under. I think
interesting.
they're going to have a massive restructuring because they're just burning through money. They're losing money.
Right. Right.
Microsoft has just subsidized the ever loving crap out of them. And they just raised like more money than any company has ever raised ever. And they have bought themselves like less than a year's worth of runway based on their revenue. Like that
I'm
doesn't look
sorry.
good.
My head is spinning right now. I'm thinking I'm applying these S curves to what we talked about earlier with identity
Mm-hmm.
and not knowing what's real, who's real. Because I'm already seeing friends and family question everything they
Yeah.
see on the internet, right? Um, and or people pointing out to me immediately, like if I think something's real, pointing out to me, no, that's fake. Here's why, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like training humans to no longer trust what they see.
It's all about
Right?
trust.
Remember the old
It's
saying
all
of
about trust.
trust half of what you hear, or none of what you hear and half of what you see.
Yeah.
Like that's going through an S curve
Yeah.
online that is exponential, and we're
Mm-hmm.
getting to the point where your interaction on the internet, all the social interactions that we're doing, which we're now discovering so many of them are fake,
Mm-hmm.
artificial. Does that lead us to a point where humanity says, I'm going to use the internet as a tool to communicate, transact with my network. I'm not going to use it for a reference of what is real or what is, and use it as a reference for how I should change or think about things in my
Mm-hmm.
life. Like, do I just do the in the future? Do we just use the internet for transactions and communication with our peer group, and then go into the real world, touch the grass, stick your feet on the ground, get in the ocean and surf, and say, talk to the people around you that you know are human,
Mm-hmm.
and say, this is reality. These are like more of a, I don't know, like when things become so distrustful, is there a reversion to the mean of what's really important, which is this human interaction?
I think it'll be both.
I don't think I'm really explaining that well, but
No. I totally follow. I totally follow, and I've
yeah,
pulled on the
okay,
same thread dozens of times. Like
okay,
I totally follow what you're meaning. Is that you have to go more and more local because increasingly, what you experience online is just artificial. But or increasingly, you just can't trust it whether it is artificial or not. And I'm just like, I mean, what you said is spot on. It's all about trust. This is all about trust, and we're losing trust. But I think largely our transition to the digital age, when you can create entire worlds and you can fake whole communities that are arguing with each other and have
yes,
relationships
yeah,
easily. Like you could trap somebody into in a group of apparently 1,000 different people, and they're actually the only real person, and they have no idea.
right,
Um, and one of the interesting things about that, like what this is going to mean is this is why web of trust is so important. Is it means that we need a different way to weight information. Like ultimately, when information, it just kind of like when phone calls and having a phone becomes almost costless. Well, then what do you get? You get millions of spam calls. Like the more costless it is, the more you need some sort of proof of work in order to establish trust.
right.
You need some sort of barrier or some sort of weight or filter. And what we are going to do when information becomes limitless, when imagery is anything that you just type into a box and then you have an image for it or a video for it, well, then you need a way to weight and filter the trust of that information. And you will do that through your social circle, both locally and online. But your online one will just be much more, it's not scrutinized. It's not more scrutinized. It's just that it will suddenly be scrutinized just like you have unbelievable filters and scrutiny that you have in the physical world. Like huge layers of them that you don't think about. Like just the body language of someone when you meet them. Nope, not going to talk to that person.
Right.
Just the way they say something. Like you have filter on top of filter on top of filter on top of filter. And 98% of them are subconscious. Like, but you are incredibly scrutinizing and like picky about your social circles, who you feel comfortable with, who you talk to, what you talk to each one of them about, which social mask you put on when you're talking to them. You know, like I don't bring up politics with this person. You know what I mean? But we don't have that online. Online has been we've been in this weird transition in the move into the digital era where we just kind of like say anything to everybody and it's all just like a big broadcast network kind of. And we're getting to the point where that doesn't sustain itself in the way technology now works. It was mostly a transitional phase. It's kind of like just in networks in general. When you're small, cohesive, and you're like culturally the same, culturally cohesive, you know, like when Usenet first came up, you could get away with just going up there and talking to people. Everybody was the same. Nostr that way today. Is everybody's basically a Bitcoiner. Tons of anarchists and stuff like so many. You can politically. There's so much vibe and shared hope and optimism because everybody's a builder or everybody's there because they see like potential in this thing. They all generally have like, even the people who disagree, they're on the left or the right, or they're anarchist and just independent from all of it. Doesn't matter. There's always like threads of, okay, well, we do align in this way. We just lean in a certain way. You know, so there's like a lot of cultural cohesion on Nostr right now, but that's literally because it's nascent. And I think we've partially seen a lot of this with the history of the internet, even though it's gone global. Like there's still layers of that sort of common ground. And now we've reached this point where it's so infinite. It's so easy to create infinite anything, infinite people, infinite conversation, infinite imagery, that we just have to build up layers and layers and layers of filtering and scrutiny. And that's why our choice is either we hold our own keys and figure out how to make those filters ourselves with a web of trust where I know you, like I know Paul is a real person. Have we met in person?
I don't think so.
No.
I mean, we might have bumped into each other at a conference or something like that.
Well, I don't know you're a real person then. Okay, so technically, I don't know. But I have a relatively high confidence that you're a real person. So I put you in my web of trust. I follow you on Nostr. I find you on Twitter, and I was like, oh yeah, that's Paul, you know. And so suddenly, when you tell me something is real, or that you found this thing, or you shared this thing, it weighs more. It weighs more than something I get from someone random. And all of this is what Bitcoin is about. This is what holding your own keys is about. This is what Nostr and owning your feed and your data is about. And AI is kind of the wild card that's screwing so much of this up, and realizing that this either is be responsible, hold your own keys, or dystopia of you have to confirm everything. You have to scan your ball sack to get into your bank account. You know, like it's just literally like totalitarianism on top of totalitarianism, not just because somebody wants to be the totalitarian and that's very beneficial to them, but because they don't have a different way to prove who you are, you know? And so again, like goes all the way back to survival of the fittest. Like if we don't shift, we're still going to shift. You know, if we don't go to hold your own keys, we still have to keep going down this path. There's no turning the boat around. And you know, you're swimming upriver. You're swimming against the current. You're just going to drown.
Yeah. I mean, we keep dropping the word trust,
Mm-hmm.
and Bitcoin is mathematically proving trust
Mm-hmm.
in a way that allows us all to use it without knowing who each other are. But at the same time, I see when I interact with a Bitcoin community, like we may have never actually met in person before, but at the same time, we have a shared trust because we're both involved in this Bitcoin thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, even when I go to a conference like in Nashville with 25, 20,000, whatever it was, people, there's a shared amount of trust that most of the people in this room, I could sit down next to somebody I've never met before and have an instant connection and conversation and a
Yeah.
sense of agreement on a lot of things. Um, and I can't remember the name, but there's an Austrian economist that on his deathbed said something like, no matter how great the money is or how great the your economy is, that without morality, none of it works.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think there's an important component there in Bitcoin that it brings a level of morality through trust, through shared. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? It doesn't have to map perfectly, but there's a somewhat shared ideology that we're all pushing for this quality in money
Mm-hmm.
that will fix a lot of the problems in society. So that shared morality is delivering something in Bitcoin that fiat currency can't deliver, that a lot of things can't deliver.
Yeah.
And when I line that up on top of a global economy, which the internet is, this global economy of different races, different cultures, different religions, different belief systems, we have to have some sort of baseline trust and morality in this system, or it'll never function. It'll just go completely off the rails. So I'm hopeful that Bitcoin is that new layer of morality. And I'm not thinking it in the morality of my morals are right and yours are wrong. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
these key ingredients that no matter what belief system you come from, we can all agree on, add value to humanity. And that might be the glue that takes us from managing small groups, small tribes, to small city states, to empires, to now a globe of
Yeah.
shared trust. Um,
There's something in that that a lot of people talk about. Bitcoin is trustless, and so I'm not going to use anything that's not trustless. And then like
right.
it becomes the standard that like everything is supposed to be trustless. And I think it's a misunderstanding. Like an economy is based on trust. Like
Mm-hmm.
the most important commodity of any social system, any economic system, is trust. The point of Bitcoin as a trustless totem is something to fall back on as a foundation. But you cannot have an economy without trust. You cannot. Like it is the commodity of all commodities. That's why the money is the most trusted good in the society. That's what it is. It ends up being the reflection of society's value. Is that this is my receipt for what I am owed by the world. And I am trusting that that receipt can be redeemed by the people that I interact with. Which means that the point is not for everything to be trustless. The point is to be able to build up trust with a foundation that can't be cheated. Like, when you and I try to have some sort of a great example is how everybody hates corporations. And everybody thinks that they're being cheated because prices are going up, and they're mad at the grocery store. They're mad at the cashier for, not their service isn't good enough because everything got more expensive and everything got shittier. And like it's just like this constant, like we're in conflict with everyone. And people literally use Apple and Google and Amazon and then literally go out on the internet and talk about how much they hate them. Like that they're forced into this situation where I don't even trust this company. I think they are screwing me over. I think they are spying on me, but I don't have a choice. So they feel literally enslaved. Like that's why a whole bunch of people who think this is capitalism, which it's not free markets at all. but think that this is some form of subjugation or exploitation is because they don't trust. They literally, it's all broken down. Well, why are they having to raise prices? It's because the money is breaking apart the communication between those two entities, between the customer and the business. Like an analogy I've used before is, like, let's say there's two winemakers and somebody makes extremely high quality wine. They have an extremely strict and like process that they never compromise on. They just make the highest possible quality and they just make good wine. Then they government prints $2 trillion. Now you have another company that makes wine, and they just kind of do the best that they can do to get the price point that they want. Government prints $2 trillion. The person who has good wine and actually has integrity and holds honestly to the product that they make has to raise their prices by like 10% to actually keep it.
Because all their inputs just went up.
Because all their inputs went up. Yeah. The one that has no integrity and is perfectly willing to sell the exact same wine, but literally just pouring 10% of water into it and mixing it up and diluting it, has the same price. The consumer goes in and they say, this guy's screwing me. This costs 10% more. Because that's the first way it goes down the ladder. It's when the products go up in price that the consumers then experience it, and then they demand higher wages. Wages are always the last thing that move. So the consumer gets poorer before anything adjusts, which means that they hate the company that has integrity, and they rush to the company that screwed them, that gave them diluted wine, or gave them literally, like, they put water and food coloring and, fake flavoring from a Monsanto package of chemicals.
Yeah.
And this gets, every single time it happens, it's worse and worse and worse until literally the one that actually has integrity and is giving a good product is being punished over and over again and encouraged to just lie like the other guy.
Right.
Just cheat. Everybody's doing it. It doesn't matter. And then that goes down the line. And then the people who were stuck in their jobs because their savings got devalued, and then they had to go into debt because the house that they wanted is now 50% more. So now they're in debt, which means they can't lose their job, and they get asked to do something unethical by their boss, and now they don't have a choice. Now they don't have 2 months worth of savings to go find a different job. They can't say F you. They have to compromise on their integrity, and they hate themselves just a little bit more because they didn't want to do it. And it just goes down the line over and over. A white lie, a compromise of integrity, a little bit of chipping away at your soul. And over again, the trust breaks down. The trust in yourself, the trust in the person that you work for, the trust in the companies that you buy stuff from. And it is a feedback loop, decade after decade after decade. And then suddenly you have generations that grow up thinking that if it benefits you, it doesn't really matter if it's not true. It doesn't really matter if they didn't really say that because I don't like them and they wouldn't be good for me. And, this is what everybody else is saying. We should just go with the crowd. And you entrench this into the mindset of the entire population, into the entire society. And it doesn't correct. It is literally at the foundation. It is at the money that this poisonous feedback loop starts. And it is a full and uncompromising breakdown of trust in every single layer of society. And when you have good money, when you have that start to renew the relationships where the person who has the good product can actually lower their price because the value of the money goes up when everybody else is working together. You're no longer at odds with who you're doing business with. They're not your enemy anymore. And there's no, like, in the context between like you and me, if you're providing me with a service, think about the fact that someone external to our relationship broke our trust down because you're raising the price of your wine by 10% every month or every year or whatever. And I don't know why. We can't build trust because we don't have a trustless foundation. Someone external to the relationship destroyed our relationship. When you have trustless money, when you have money that is independent and verifiable, it allows us to keep our trust strong and actually have it be based on the things that you do and the things that I do and nothing else. There is no
Dude,
middleman or
brilliant.
distant counterparty that can say, distrust each other because I'm going to steal a little bit from both of you secretly and you're not going to know who it's coming from.
It's the ultimate divide and conquer.
Yeah.
That was so well said. There's so many Bitcoin memes and everything you just said. I mean, oh my God. I'm just it's just it and it, you just really succinctly summed it up. That was really great. So for folks that have been with us for an hour and a half now listening to all this, let's maybe give them what they've been waiting for. How does Bitcoin help fix this? How do we take what people are maybe perceiving as just money today and start to think of it as a way to solve for identity and trust in an internet economy?
I would say just imagine what it would be like if everything just always just got more affordable. And specifically, things got more affordable because other people made stuff better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
That
mean, you can't even buy a car today and expect it to make it past 100,000 miles.
Yeah.
Right. You're throwing away your lawnmower every 2 years. You're whatever it might be. Right. You're buying some plastic widget that breaks a week after you buy it.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid, I was using tools that my grandfather had from, the 30s. I mean, the stuff lasted forever. I still have some of that stuff in my garage. I mean, it just lasts forever. That's all gone because of everything you just described.
Yeah.
But we can get back there.
Think about how crazy it is that society is at odds. When you print new money and you flood it into the economy, inevitably, prices only rise because people bid them up, which means that the new money has to come first. Somebody gets the money before the prices reflect it. Like, it's just a reaction. The price is a reaction, which means that somebody is going to get stuff out of society. They're going to pull resources out. They're going to own more houses. They're going to own more stocks. They're going to purchase your retirement and you're going to rent it from them before someone else does. And then it's going to quote unquote trickle down to the rest of society. And when it gets to the bottom, all of the prices will have gone up. Everything will have gotten less affordable. And then they will just fight, scream, and wail to get a raise that only gets them back to zero. And when you're in that situation, it permanently induces a scarcity mindset in the economy. It means that everyone is racing to get resources as fast as they can, like hard resources, real things, to own something as fast as they can before it becomes less affordable. This is why we bought a house. I wouldn't have bought a house. If houses were getting cheaper over time, I wouldn't have done that in 2017. The only reason I did it in 2017 is because, I mean, granted, I understood where we were headed. And so I was literally looking at how much, I was trying to do the math. I'm like, how much are we going to have to print to get through this period? And I was like, holy crap, this house is going to be twice this much. It's going to be $300,000 probably in a decade, way quicker than a decade. It got there. And which meant that I absolutely, as fast as I can, I should go into debt, the debt that I can't possibly afford. Like, I couldn't pay for something $150,000. I should go into debt. I should get as low interest rate as possible so that I don't actually have to return this value to society. And then it will just devalue over time. It becomes a race to own stuff as fast as possible because the stuff is going to go up in price and the money is going to get devalued, which means that I am fighting with the other people to get stuff, to get value that I know I'm never going to have to return, because the debt is explicitly being devalued, meaning I am saying I'm going to pay you back $150,000 in value, and I'm not going to have to pay back actually $150,000, not in 2017 dollars. I'm going to get to pay it back in 2028 dollars, which is going to be nothing. The house alone will be worth $600,000. Literally, this house in 4 years will be worth $600,000. And it's a crap. It's not a fancy house. It's not. It's just a normal house in my area. And so because of that, everyone is at odds. Everyone is fighting to get things as fast as they can before it's more expensive. In a society where money is actually sound, you literally, the complete opposite relationship occurs, is that everything just gets gradually more affordable over time. Why? Because nobody's working to make stuff worse, except the government, but different story. But you don't go to work to get crappier. When you practice something for 10 days, you're better at it than when you did not practice, which means that it takes less energy and less planning and less work to get the same result. That's why you build up skills. That's why you have a resume, is to prove that you did this, to show that you're more efficient. That's why people change systems. That's why people adopt technology. That is why we get out of bed and do anything at all. Nobody goes to work for 8 hours and then likes to come home at a worse place than when they started. That will piss off anybody, literally anyone. The whole point is progress, which means that if we had sound money, if the money wasn't being printed, everything would get more affordable by default. And you personally wouldn't even have to do anything because you wouldn't be fighting everyone else in society. The whole point of society is to make everything affordable and better for everyone else. It's the only reason we do anything.
Right.
Which
So-
means that
Go ahead. Sorry.
it's basically just imagine a world where life gets better by default and you get the benefit. You're working together with your neighbor. You're working together with the person who owns your grocery store. Like, they are trying to make things better for you. They're trying to make things better for themselves. And if they make things better for themselves, they get better for you too. We have the opposite right now. If they make things better and they try to own things as fast as they can with debt, it's directly at the expense of you being able to afford it. Because you were going to buy the house at 150, they bid it up to 180, and now you can't buy it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the difference between a society at odds and a society working together. And it's all in the money.
And it's that broken money, just to kind of pull this all together, that broken money is doing that because it's inflationary.
Yeah.
If we insert a deflationary money like Bitcoin, that's what's driving the prices down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to point out to people that AI is hyper deflationary.
Hyper deflation. Yeah. Crazy.
Hyper deflationary, right? So it is going to drive the cost of goods down. The problem with AI doing that with an inflationary money is that it makes the debt unsustainable. You cannot repay that debt because the price of everything that you need is going down, less revenue to the companies, less GDP, less tax, can't afford the debt. The government can't afford the debt. If we were to insert Bitcoin as a currency and eliminate the inflationary currency, then in sync, you're getting higher purchasing power while goods are getting down. Now we're talking about a hyper deflationary environment where everything is becoming super affordable and driving just a tremendous amount of abundance, right? Where you could literally say to yourself, oh, I don't have the money for the down payment on that house. I'm just going to wait a couple months. My money's coming up. The price of houses are going down. Then I'll be able to afford it.
Yeah.
I'll just save a little bit more. I'll delay gratification a little bit more. And boom, then the math will work. That's a whole nother world.
You also have to think about the order of operations, which is crazy about this. You think about it, inflation, wages are sticky, right? Like they literally, even Keynesian economists call them sticky prices because they are always the last thing to adjust. They're the longest term contracts. They're the biggest overhead, and they are one of the largest cost of anything and everything in the economy. Wages move slower than practically every other price. Your gas is going to move. The price of gas might move when you pull up to the station. All goods and services will move very, very quickly in price, which means that when somebody prints $2 trillion out of thin air, you're going to get poor first. That's the first and only thing that happens is you get poorer because all of the prices of the things that you buy are going to go up, and the price of what you're getting paid is going to be worth less. The exact opposite occurs under deflationary money, under money that's simply sound, is that as more stuff is built and made and improved in the economy, every single day that people go to work, the economy is getting a little bit better, because that's the whole point of going to work. Yep. And because of that, your wage goes up in purchasing power before the price, like before anything about the change in wages occurs. So you are always, it's the difference between being in debt versus being on savings, being in an inflationary economy or being in a sound money economy, is that the value either leads or trails the pricing mechanism. And necessarily, if you are manipulating the pricing mechanism is going to screw you before you get any value out of it. And because of that, a deflationary money, a money like Bitcoin, would just default. You would get wealthier. You just keep getting wealthier all the time, directly proportional to the wealth of the rest of society.
Yeah. If we're painting this picture properly, and people are looking at Bitcoin, looking at artificial intelligence as as potentially a threat to their job, a threat to their income, then
it shouldn't be. I don't think they should.
But you don't think it will be?
I don't think they should think about it that way. But keep going.
It is a common thread.
It is
that many jobs would be lost, especially knowledge workers, right? And I want to hear why you think that's not true. But I know that in that theme, right, it becomes very important to have a deflationary money, because if that is even partially true, then the debt is going to be unsustainable for the average person. I'm talking about just their private debt, not even going into thinking about government debt at this point. But I want to hear what are your thoughts on job losses in the economy due to AI?
It's classic Jevons paradox. So Jevons paradox is a concept about if something gets more affordable or more efficient, we just get more of it. So, and this is why universally, like so many of our political means of like stopping something or getting people to stop doing something or use less energy or whatever it is, are ultimately fail. They fail across the board because they misunderstand the economic incentives of the situation. So here's just a simple anecdotal analogy to kind of explain what I mean. If you lower the price of creating good media, of generating video or imagery, well, then what happens is you just vastly increase the scope of who and what kind of media you can produce. So I've had in my mind for a very, very long time a bunch of different film. I went to film school. That's what I loved. Like basically, I was a movie nerd and I was a tech nerd. So I was in high school. I built robots and computers and watched movies. Like those are my two things. And my real passion was film and telling story. And but then I found out that money was tech. You just get poor. You just get poor making movies anyway. Or you do somebody else's bitch work, which is what I did in LA for a while. And I was like, this sucks. And it wasn't my culture either. I was already kind of like libertarian-esque and everybody was just like in my business. And
yeah,
it was incongruent. And so in that context, I have like 9 feature film ideas that I've broken down. I have a bunch of old written journals where I've like put these, and they just like they've manifested in my brain for a really long time. And I've got a couple of Bitcoin short stories that I think would be really, really great. But you know what? I knew most of them were never going to happen until I was just like dumb rich, until I could just straight up fund them myself and make those movies happen. Unless, of course, the cost of making a movie plummets. What generative AI has done is I'm workshopping with the Free Market Kids with Scott and Tylee, and a number of other people, and I've met and we've talked, and we've been brainstorming on like how to put stories together because we can make an animated short without animating anything. thanks to AI. And what we get, and it's a very similar example. My sister-in-law does graphic design. And for a long time, like we would talk, and she has big graphic design people that she follows and friends or whatever, and all of them, like, seeing the generative AI stuff, are like crying, like distraught that their jobs were done. And what actually happened is that now I could actually afford to hire my sister for a lot of different things because she could do 10 times as much as she could previously do. Like, suddenly it makes sense to make a graphic for every single episode because it's not that hard. You know, like, you don't have to create each individual elements and vectorize all of it. You can AI generate 4 images, then use stuff that you made custom for the show, and then composite something together way, way quicker than you can paint it all, you know? And what it means is just that we are going to have, it's like YouTube. YouTube didn't destroy the art of making film because it got easier. It vastly increased the scope of the type of film that was made. It didn't have to be a sitcom or a feature film. Now it's a tutorial. Now it's a random podcast. Now it's a stupid, funny video of you just running face first into the wall and falling down for 15 seconds. It just means that you can make video for a billion things that never made economic sense before because you can just do it with your phone and post it online in 20 minutes.
That's a great point.
It changes the economics of these things. It's not going to take away your job. You're just going to have 100,000 more people making films and graphics and needing people to do these things than they did before. It will change the nature of the job.
Yeah,
it will change the industry. It will change the tools that you are using, but it will not change the need for the skill. Because it's also important to remember that all of these things are generated just based off what humans make, and they still can't make something new. An AI doesn't, it's not AI, it's a probability machine. It doesn't have judgment. It doesn't create new things. It doesn't have that the 5 senses and the sense of mortality and the concern and the judgment and the feelings. It can't, like, a good example. There was a case of a dude who was having seizures, and I can't remember, this was like in the 50s or something like that. He was having seizures, and this doctor thought that he could cure it, and by seeing this part of the brain that was constantly firing when he was having seizures. And so he's like, we're going to remove this part of the brain. And they kind of botched it and removed way too much, and removed a ton of his frontal lobe. And he was still completely capable. He could think, he could do basic math, he could do all, like, everything, but he could no longer associate a feeling with any of it. And because of that, he was completely incapacitated. His IQ was still the same, but if you told him, like, should you spend time worrying about the fact that this pencil is on the ground, or whether or not you should be doing your work, he wouldn't know. He would just be like, I'll just do the pencil. Or he was just frozen in a unable to choose, because it is how we feel about things that every judgment, every fact, every choice, every narrative is actually chosen.
Oh man, that's totally right. Yeah. That's the this is so predominant in philosophy and psychiatry, how feelings drive beliefs and then action.
Yes.
Right, which that AI misses all that.
AI can't do any of that. And all of that actually stems from value judgments. And you can't have value judgments unless you're going to die.
Right. Yeah.
Like, if you're not mortal, nothing matters.
Good point.
Like, you don't have a sense of time. AI is not a human in a box. AI is a program. It's just a piece of software. It's not going to make judgments. It's not going to replace decision making or values. And most of our economy is social anyway, and nobody wants to be social with a computer except weirdos. They want humans. Go back to the old guys that you have to protect, who's like, I still just want to pay them. They're desperate for human interaction. They just want to talk to somebody. AI is never going to replace your job. It's never going to replace people in the economy. And the only way AI can get better is if people make better things and then we train those AI on it.
Mm-hmm. So it just keeps coming back to, are you able to iterate fast enough
Are
to
you able
change
to
your
use the
business
tools?
model? Yeah. Are you able to use the tools,
Are
prompt it
you going to
properly?
be disrupted? Or are you just going to use the thing that's disrupting you and be the one who's utilizing the new system or the new way? Are you going to adapt, or are you going to bitch about it until you get fired? You know,
Yeah.
like, just use it. It's just a tool.
So
It's
for
just a
people that
tool. And it doesn't
are
take away
listening,
art, and it doesn't take away meaning, and it doesn't
right.
take away value. It just means that the things that we can make are that much easier. If you can tell a good story, it means that the barrier and the funds that you need to tell that story are lower than they have ever been. And now a 10-year-old with just a stroke of genius and a good idea could very well in a couple of years be able to make a seemingly big budget feature film by themselves, but it will still be the story that made it good. And that will
Yeah.
still come from a human.
Actually, it would incentivize the story,
It's exactly right. It incentivizes good story
which
because
is why,
now the graphics don't matter anymore. Go back to the
yes,
video game analogy. People just stop giving a shit. You got a really
yes,
great painting? Cool. What's it mean? Why do I
yeah,
care about this painting? What's new about it?
right.
People got AI fatigue in like 6 months with just
Yeah.
like a bunch of random pictures, you know?
Remember when we were, assuming we're about the same age, when we were in high school, how we were just like rushing to the next great film because the graphics were so intense and it was
Yeah.
so realistic compared to what we saw as kids. And then it gets to the point where now you're just like,
Yeah.
eh,
It's
I
like,
want to
oh, The
find
Last
that. I want to
Jedi.
find that really great story, you know?
The Last Jedi is one of the most beautiful movies. There is so much great art, and the graphics are just incredible. The dog fights are just unbelievable. What they did with the graphics in the new, like, the new films and stuff. But that movie is utter dog shit. That is like one of the worst movies I have ever seen. I came out of the theater baffled, like, just like kind of stunned at how shit that movie was. They put like $200 million, like $400 million, something retarded into that movie, and it's so bad. Again, the graphics don't matter. If you have a good
Yes.
story that drive a narrative that drives, that you can connect to a human element, what does that
Yes.
character love, and why are they being prevented from getting that thing? That that can be the worst graphics in the world. It can be pictures that are just Ken Burns effect sliding across the screen for 40 minutes. But if you can captivate somebody with a good story, it just means that you don't have to use Ken Burns effect, because AI is going to
Right.
make you let you tell that story in a beautiful way that was previously only capable by people who had $300 million and a big
Uh,
budget producer and knew somebody in Hollywood. That barrier, that network of like, only we're allowed to do this, has just broken down.
that's so
They
great.
don't
That
matter anymore
is,
because you can tell a story, and all you need is a computer with a GPU.
in this sense, AI is pro-human, and that's
100%.
very hopeful. That's very
100%.
hopeful.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about that. And not only that, I want to see your films when they come out. So I'm very looking forward
Give
to
me time. Give me time. I'm
that.
excited. I'm excited. I've been trying to like consolidate things and get my time and like how I do my focus, because I'm really jazzed about getting back to story. Like, it
That's
was
cool.
it was a big part of what I've always wanted to do, and it was funny. I'll tell just like kind of a little story of my perspective changes when I went into tech. I told you I went out to LA and did film for a short while. And part of me loved it, part of me hated it, just because I was literally just doing bitch work for a studio. Scott, I was actually on the Disney
I've
lot.
been there, done that as well.
Yeah, yeah. And so I felt like I was like, oh, I'm in it, but like, this sucks. And so I came back and started doing my own little media business and like wedding videos and stuff. But I just wanted to do what I wanted to tell my stories, and I just didn't see a
Yeah.
path to that. So I went into tech. And I love building computers, sysadmin stuff, internet technician. Like, it was always fun to me. So it was an easy second choice that actually paid a lot. Um, and then started the podcast and came back around. It was like 3 or 4 years after the podcast. And I was like, okay, I'm doing this full time and I'm just all in on Bitcoin. I'm just like, this is just what I'm doing now. And I don't know when it happened because like when I went into tech, I had this kind of like come to Jesus moment where I was like, I'm not a filmmaker anymore. I thought of myself as that for a long time, but that was what I was going to tell stories. And that was like a big mental shift in my world of just realizing that like that really wasn't my future anymore. And then I go through this whole arc and just kind of randomly start a podcast for no particular reason. And then that kind of starts being successful and I stay and then I go all the way that way. And then like I have a production company. And then at some point a few years ago, it just struck me. I was like, I'm doing media again. Like I can do film again. I can literally go all the way back around. Tech has now saved my life to the point that I can all go all the way back around and actually do this again. And I actually have the capability. I have the funds. I have the network, and so like we've been slowly over the last year, like putting pieces of this puzzle back together. And I think it's the thing that Bitcoin is missing is telling the story. Cause that's not easy to do either. Like, and I don't pretend to say that like, oh, I'm just going to come out and I'm going to bust up. I'm going to have best feature films ever. No, like it's going to be a very long, grueling process of like pulling out the heart of like human stories in trying to teach lessons or things about money. But
Well,
I'm
maybe
jazzed.
you could do.
I'm jazzed.
That's really exciting. Maybe you could do the antithesis to 1984. Do 2148 when all the Bitcoin are issued, and what the world looks like then.
Hell yeah. But I'm excited. So hopefully I have something to report in nearish future.
Well, when you do, come back and tell us.
Of course.
For anybody who's all of a sudden hopeful for this AI future, where would you send them to learn more and become more comfortable with AI, read resources, whatever you think it would be best for somebody who wanted to get started?
I have a lot of links in the AI Unchained feed. And I haven't really made this public yet, but I'm pretty much consolidating everything back to Bitcoin Audible because I kind of put too many branches on my shows and stuff. And so Bitcoin Audible is I'm just going to allow myself the freedom to have guys' takes about AI because it's just a topic I'm interested in and it's my show. I can do what I want. AI is not going anywhere. It's just, you're probably just going to find it in the Bitcoin Audible feed now as kind of like AI specific shows. But the AI Unchained feed will stay there just for resources and links and all of that stuff. And we have like I don't know, 50 odd episodes or whatever of that show. I've been doing it about weekly for a while. Honestly, there's just a lot of good tools and things that I've explored in there. And you can also find a lot of things on the YouTube channel for like how to make use of it. Because I have so many different little like single use apps and things. Like I even have a whole series on YouTube called Devs Who Can't Code, where we just literally go talk to ChatGPT or Llama and we just build something. We just cool. Develop an app. And I have made so many single use apps that I use constantly for my workflows. You would not believe the number of things that you spend like 5 minutes on every time you do it and don't think about it. And if you actually just spent 30 minutes talking to an LLM and just kept asking it, all right, how do I make this drag and drop? How do I get it to do this? All right, it did this and that wasn't exactly what I wanted. How do I get it to fix it and make it do this instead? And you iterate with that a bunch of different times. And then suddenly you have this little app. And now this process that took you 5 minutes every single day takes you a second. And cool. You save an excruciating amount of time and your workflow is literally custom to you. That's the kind of stuff we explore because it's really just kind of like digging into all the open source tools and then the larger implications. So I would say check out that show, but also just follow Bitcoin Audible because that's kind of where it's going to consolidate to. I just want one show. Yeah.
Okay. Great. And any social handles or anything where people could follow you and learn more?
Yeah, I'm the guy Swann, literally everywhere. Like
okay.
Instagram, awesome. Rumble, YouTube, Twitter, Nostr, the guy Swann. I'm around.
Cool. Guy, thank you so much for such a great discussion today. We learned a ton.
Hell yeah, man. Good to have you.
I'll give you the last.
Actually, talk to you then, Paul. For some reason, I thought we had met at some point. I don't know.
I mean, if it is, it was probably a Bitcoin conference or something.
It was
like that.
100%. 100%. We've just
Yeah.
bumped
I'm
into,
sure if I
but-
passed you in a conference, I said hi because I've been watching you for years and I love your content. So I wouldn't have
Well,
let
we'll
you
actually
walk
make
by
a
without
note.
grabbing you.
We'll make a note next time to actually
Yeah.
go hang out or get a drink or
10-4.
something. Okay.
Awesome, brother. All right, my friend. Thank you so much. You guys like and subscribe so we can get Guy back here again and we can watch a film with him.
Oh yeah, we got to talk about that. When that's done, we'll definitely come back. We'll definitely come back.
We have advertisements on our ATMs. We'll put it up on the ATMs.
Yeah, that's
That'd be
right.
cool. Awesome. All right, brother. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Yeah, man. You too.
Okay. Bye-bye.